A sharp crack echoed as a crystal-clear glass of white wine slipped and shattered at Camilla Moreau's feet. The spill spread across the polished marble floor like a blemish in a space meticulously curated to perfection. The woman who had dropped the glass didn't apologize. She simply tilted her head and smiled a thin smile like the edge of a blade. "Oh, sorry. I thought you were one of the servers." A soft giggle bubbled up from her group of friends, then spread like waves, sweet on the surface, but laced with venom. The setting was the main terrace of the Marquesa Country Estate, where every step was measured by status, pedigree, and stock prices. Camilla, in an unbranded white blouse, cream linen trousers, and faded canvas shoes, suddenly became a blot of ink on luxury parchment. Another woman, draped in a Chanel tweed coat, leaned in to whisper just loud enough for everyone to hear. Even her hair looks like she slept on the street. But what made the onlookers freeze wasn't the humiliation itself. It was Camilla's eerily calm reaction. She didn't blush. She didn't turn away. She didn't defend herself. Her eyes simply lowered to the shattered wine glass, then rose again, her gaze not angry, but steady enough to shake the entire atmosphere. As if the one being humiliated wasn't a victim at all, but the only person here who could see through everyone's mask. A man from the event staff approached and cleared his throat. "I'm sorry, but it seems your pass for today. It isn't valid. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable in the front lounge." And she nodded just once, with a serenity that felt almost theatrical, as if the whole awkward scene had merely been part of an audition. She turned and walked away, leaving behind sneers and dismissive stares, yet taking with her a growing curiosity among those watching. Who is she? Why didn't she react? And what's waiting behind that silence? The massive glass doors closed behind Camilla with a heavy thud, not the sound of metal or glass, but of dignity being forced into a box riddled with prejudice. But that wasn't the final blow. Just seconds later, a security guard in a black suit wearing a Bluetooth earpiece approached her with a stiff expression. "I've been asked to escort you all the way to the front gate to ensure there are no further misunderstandings." In a setting where people scoffed with just a glance, that line felt colder than any direct insult. Camilla pressed her lips together, saying nothing. She stood up and walked, the sound of her heels echoing through the stone corridor, each step seemingly grinding down the false masks of those who had mocked her. But as she neared the exit, a voice crackled through the guard's radio. "Stop! She's not to leave the premises. Someone just landed." No one understood what was happening. Curious eyes peeked from the upper balconies. Whispers started to ripple through the space. And then a deep, weighty whirring filled the air from above. Camilla looked up, her eyes flickering with surprise but without panic. She recognized it. A jet-black helicopter, its sleek body etched with the Valier Holdings insignia, was descending over the grassy field near Hole 9. She turned to the security guard, the one who had just shamed her, with a blank stare, and gave him a small smile. Not smug, not vengeful, but the knowing smile of someone who already foresaw what was about to happen. No one had time to react. No one understood what was unfolding. But the audience watching, oh, they knew exactly what this was: the calm before the storm. The emotions compressed by insults, the cold dismissal, the sneering contempt, all of it was stretched to its absolute limit, waiting for just one spark to ignite. And they wouldn't have to wait long. The roar of the helicopter's engine thundered across the elite golf course like a discordant note piercing through an aristocratic symphony. Guests began setting down their champagne glasses, stepping onto the balcony, and shielding their eyes from the swirling wind to see clearly. The rotor blades chopped through the air in powerful pulses, whipping up the perfectly coiffed hair and delicately powdered faces of the very women who had mocked Camilla. And then, from the open door of the helicopter, a man in a charcoal grey suit stepped out, eyes sharp as steel, presence commanding without need for introduction. Nathan Valier, CEO of Valier Holdings, the enigmatic billionaire behind a financial empire that was quietly acquiring the world's most coveted real estate, and the man every corporation in New York dreamed of shaking hands with. But Nathan didn't look at any of them. He walked straight past the lavish conference tables, the designer gowns, and the frozen stairs, heading toward Camilla, who still stood at the far end of the stone path, right where she had just been asked to leave. He stopped in front of her, extended his hand, naturally reverently, and said loud enough for the entire terrace to hear, "You kept your promise, and I came to keep mine." Then he embraced her, in front of everyone, without hesitation, without explanation. Just an embrace, genuine, unflinching, yet powerful enough to shatter every trembling prejudice flickering in the eyes around them. One club matron nearly dropped her Dior clutch. A golf club PR staffer stammered, "Mr. Valier, you know her." Nathan turned his voice colder than the helicopter's wind. "Know her. She's the one who taught me the difference between kindness and pretense. And starting today, she's the one who will help me transform this entire place." The atmosphere dropped into a deadly silence. The mocking laughter from before vanished like it had never existed. The high society guests, who once ridiculed Camilla, suddenly shrank like extras in a story they hadn't realized they were part of. And at that moment, Camilla turned to face the crowd, not with vengeance, but with a strange, serene calm. The audience understood that she hadn't come to make a scene. She came to remind them that sometimes you don't need to react, because the truth will always find its way to the surface. No one said a word, yet the entire party slipped into an eerie state of disorientation, as if everyone was suddenly standing on a stage where the script had just been torn apart. The women who once mocked Camilla were now frozen not out of fear, but out of shame. Their eyes darted away, their voices caught in their throats, as if even the slightest cough could expose the facade they had so carefully curated. And Camilla, the one once ridiculed as someone who wandered in from the laundromat, was now the only person standing tall among the elite, without designer gowns, without glittering jewelry, only with a pair of eyes that saw the world for what it truly was, raw and deeply honest. Nathan didn't need to say another word. His very presence, his public defense of Camilla before them all, was a thunderous slap to the face of a society obsessed with judging people by their outer shell. But Camilla didn't seize the moment for revenge. She didn't smirk, didn't call anyone out, didn't name those who had wounded her. Instead, she calmly returned to the table where she had once been, asked to leave, gently poured herself a glass of water, set it down, and spoke to the organizers in a voice soft yet unwavering. "Thank you for not welcoming me. It helped me see exactly what needs to change first." There was no venom in her tone, but everyone understood it was a declaration. A challenge not made with fists, but with dignity. No one dared speak. The silence at that moment wasn't respectful. It was a surrender. Nathan turned to the club coordinator and spoke as if the decision had been made long before. "She will lead the entire rebranding campaign of Marquesa Estate. I want this place to reflect real values, not just numbers wrapped around someone's wrist." The transformation began right then and there, and the audience, those watching every breath of this unfolding story, knew Camilla didn't need to win by defeating anyone. She only had to stay true to herself. And that is what made her unforgettable. As the party gradually dissolved into a trail of quiet footsteps and eyes too ashamed to face the truth, Camilla stepped into the private lounge of the club's resort. The atmosphere inside was so still that it felt detached from the chaos that had just erupted outside. Nathan followed, but this time he was no longer the cold CEO of Valier Holdings. His gaze had softened, not because Camilla was an ex, but because she was the only one who had ever believed in him when the whole world had turned its back. On the table lay an old photograph, the two of them sitting in front of a rusty coffee stand in Brooklyn, clutching cheap pastries, laughing like tomorrow didn't matter. Back then, Camilla was just a diner waitress, and Nathan was a broke intern, getting fired from a hedge fund for being a cultural misfit. They once made a foolish promise. If I ever become the boss, you'll be the first person I bring in, not as a guest, but as the one I trust with everything. But then life swept them away. Nathan rose too quickly. Camilla vanished from social media. They hadn't seen each other in nearly 9 years until today, when all he did was write a single line on an old golf course map. If they kick you out, I guessed right. Camilla looked at Nathan without blame. She simply asked gently, "Why today?" Nathan replied, his voice almost an apology, "Because today is the day Marquesa goes public. And it's also the first day you should step into this world, as the one who's going to redefine it." At that moment, the audience didn't just witness a reversal of power, they touched the deepest layer of the story, a love built not on wealth, but on the act of keeping a promise when it would have been easier to forget. And it was that silent loyalty that made their reunion not about revenge, but about restoring the order of what's right. Camilla turned toward the wide glass window, where the sunset bathed the entire estate in golden light. She exhaled not from exhaustion, but as if an old vow had just been fulfilled at the right time, in the right place, and in exactly the right way. Just 3 days later, Marquesa Country Estate graced the front pages of every major financial and luxury lifestyle magazine. Valier Holdings announces new co-CEO. Camilla Moreau, the woman once expelled from this very estate for not dressing the part. The news spread like wildfire, igniting public outrage and forcing bowed heads from those who had once mocked her without restraint. A week later, as Camilla made her official appearance at the brand restructuring board meeting, she wore no expensive labels, no power suit, just the same elegant white blouse and worn leather shoes, yet her gaze alone silenced the entire room. On the table lay internal dossiers. Alongside them, a list of individuals who had used their power to humiliate, belittle, and have her removed from that infamous party. Among them was Alicia Haraway, a board member who had once delivered the cruelest line, "Are you sure you're not dirtying the walkway?" She stood, voice trembling. "I'm sorry, I didn't know who you were that day." Camilla looked up, her eyes no longer angry, but filled with quiet exhaustion and a trace of sorrow. "You know what? The fact that you didn't know who I was and still acted like that, that's the real problem." Silence fell. No one dared breathe too loudly. But instead of firing anyone, Camilla continued, "I'm not here for revenge. I'm here to change what it means to be respected. From this moment on, kindness will be the core culture at Marquesa. And if anyone can't live with that, they should leave before I have to ask them to." No need to raise her voice. No need to flaunt power. Camilla made the entire system bow simply by standing firm in her values. Her forgiveness didn't come from weakness, but from a rare strength, the ability to not let the past define who she would become. At that moment, the audience didn't just see a woman standing tall among those who once scorned her. They saw a leader, a living symbol of a new generation, one that believes kindness is not a weakness, but a force strong enough to shake empires built on arrogance. Less than a month after Camilla officially took the reins, the entire atmosphere at Marquesa Estate had transformed like magic, but not the kind spun from hollow PR slogans or flashy media campaigns. The change came from astonishingly small details. Service staff, once ignored like ghosts, now had their names etched into a recognition board at the Grand Hall. Every Monday morning, Camilla personally sent an email to each department, not to turn briefings into blame sessions, but into moments where real people were genuinely seen. And what stunned everyone, even more, revenue soared, membership applications skyrocketed, and the media began praising Marquesa voluntarily, even though Camilla hadn't spent a dime on advertising. A veteran businesswoman exclaimed in an interview, "She didn't build power through fear. She built it through fairness, and that makes people choose loyalty on their own." Soon after, an internal survey revealed something no previous CEO had ever achieved, not even after millions spent on management consultants and complex KPI systems. 97% of employees said they felt more respected, more heard, and more committed to staying long-term. But it was during a major press conference where Camilla was invited to speak as a symbol of reform in luxury hospitality that she said something that left the entire room breathless. "I never want anyone to have to ask, am I elegant enough to be treated with respect? Because every human being in any position deserves kindness long before they've proven their worth." In that moment, every eye that had once doubted her, from the financial world, from the media, from the very faces that had mocked her at that infamous party, had to admit Camilla wasn't just a woman who pulled off a miracle. She was a reminder. That power doesn't come from where you stand, but from how you stand for others. 1 year later, the grand reopening of Marquesa Estate under its new identity took place before a global press audience, major investors, and even the very people who once laughed at Camilla. But this time, there was no red carpet, no $1,000 wine, no hollow ceremonial speeches. Instead, Camilla stepped into the center of the grand hall wearing a simple, elegant white dress. Beside her stood not a line of powerful consultants, but a young girl, the daughter of a former gardener, now an honors student at the Leadership Academy Camilla had recently founded. On the massive screen behind her, there were no revenue charts, only faces: a chef once rejected for lacking formal education, a security guard once scolded for greeting the wrong person, and a once homeless elderly man whom Camilla had invited in for breakfast, now serving as a spiritual advisor for Marquesa's humanitarian training program. Amid thunderous applause, a voice rose from the crowd. It was Alicia Haraway, the same woman from that humiliating day, standing to speak. "I used to believe power came from control, but Camilla taught me true power comes from granting trust and empowering others." Camilla didn't cry. She simply smiled, a gentle smile, as if she had no need to say anything more, because everything she had ever needed to prove was already right there in front of them, not in spreadsheets, but in the hearts and eyes of every person who had once received her unconditional kindness. As the camera panned to the last row, Nathan, now her husband, sat holding their young daughter, nodding quietly, with pride. He was no longer the center of the spotlight. He was the support behind it, because today, the world needed to see this. The woman once thrown out of a party for not meeting a standard of class had just reminded the world that dignity never needs permission. It only requires that you never give up. The story ended in a storm of applause, but what lingered longer in the hearts of the audience was something deeper. The feeling of being inspired, awakened, and reminded that in a world too quick to judge by appearances, there are still people like Camilla who live truthfully, live boldly, and live kindly until the very end. Dear friend, if the story of Camilla Moreau touched your heart, it's probably not just because she turned the tables and made those who once looked down on her bow their heads, but because she proved something simple yet profound. You don't need glamour to be respected. You just need to never abandon your values, even when no one else recognizes them. The lesson here isn't about revenge. It's about how Camilla used kindness to rebuild a more just world, one where no one is excluded just because they don't wear luxury watches or come from a prestigious family. She didn't change to fit prejudice. She made prejudice change to fit humanity. To me, this story isn't just about a woman who won, it's about all of us who've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or pushed aside, yet quietly held on to our integrity until one day the light found its way to us. If you too believe in the power of kindness and that integrity, even when silent, can still change an entire system, then don't forget to like, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to Toch Story so you won't miss the next soul-stirring and inspiring tale. Because who knows, maybe the next story will be part of your own journey.